All right. Well, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the Stepdad Soundcheck. I am Daniel. This is Mark. We are your hosts, and we're going to be discussing the latest music we've been listening to, the latest opinions we've got just on our mind. Mark, want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Mark. I've been playing music since I was, I don't know, probably 6 years old. Actually, that red guitar that you see right behind me there, Fender Mustang, that was my first guitar ever. So it was important for me to have that in the shop. Grew up completely obsessed with Eddie Van Halen. And then, your musical taste change in life. So, yeah, it's evolved over the years. Other than that, in my real life, I'm a winemaker. So here in the Midwest, so that's pretty rad.
All right.
What
Hell
about you,
yeah.
Daniel? What do you do?
uh,
I don't. I think you're
I,
kind of like if you've ever seen How I Met Your Mother. Um, I think you're kind of like Neil Patrick Harris's character in there, where it's like nobody really knows what he does, but we kind of do at the same time.
funny. Well, my grandmother played guitar. My father played guitar. Even my father noodled around on guitar. So, I mean, I grew up with one classical, one acoustic in the house at all times, and was not really looking for a guitar. I guess guitar found me. At the same time, I never perfected my instrument. Regardless, I grew up with it, and I love it. So, aside from that, I am not working in the wine industry. I am working a pretty boring office job. Work from home. Um, And me and Mark live in different states now. We are not able to link up and just kind of jam around like we used to be able to when we both lived in the same state. But we've had a bit of a tradition every Friday to catch up. What have we been listening to? What do we think about this new album release? What do we think about this new song? Every Friday, we have FaceTime Fridays. And it's the conversations we have there have definitely made us realize that we should at least start this. So here we are.
Absolutely. Well, Daniel, I have to ask, what makes us anything that resembles an authority on music?
Um, I feel we are a nice bridge between what metalheads would probably color as modern metal and classic roots. I feel we are a nice bridge between the two. I feel you and I have a good ear for metal that will attract normies. And
Yeah,
I
I
I
agree.
I, I hate to even use the word metal these days. I would prefer to say heavy music because
It's becoming
you know when
tougher
people
and tougher.
when people say metal, obviously we're thinking of Iron Maiden, we're thinking of Metallica, we're thinking of maybe some 3 Days Grace.
Oh.
We're thinking of we'll get into that later. But my point being, metal has had this stigma or this stereotype that I don't think it will ever shake. So I don't know. I don't see myself as a metal fan. I find myself as a fan of heavy music.
Something that gets your heart pumping. You know what I think is great about us and what makes us really an authority beyond um, our rapport together as well as our history of listening to heavy music. I want to preface this and make a big disclaimer up front that that's not all we listen to. I think you and I have such a large swath of things that we listen to, and um, I think that's what really gives us the ability to be open minded and listen to music in a way that really puts it at the forefront of our lives and our lifestyles. We're constantly seeking something that's going to make us be surprised or get excited. Um, Most of the time, that happens through heavier music. And again, I hate to use the word metal because there's so many subgenres and everything. And I will also say up front, we might make references to subgenres, but we're just going to kind of call everything that's metal metal,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
uh, and just kind of keep it simple. But I think our background of being able to really open mindedly listen to anything doesn't mean we're going to like it, but I send you music recommendations, you send me music recommendations. I'd say 50% of the time they land, and 50% of the time we're like, why'd you send me that? you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. And I'm not going, especially in this forum, I'm not going to take it easy on you.
Oh,
There's a lot of times you'll send me something, and I'm like, man, something has come over Mark, and I don't know. I've got to save my friend.
well, let me ask you this, Daniel. Let's kind of flip the tides here and think about it this way. What was the first song or album or artist that just made you go, oh shit? No matter the age, what was that for you?
Um, it had to be either Soundgarden or Alice in Chains.
Ooh.
And I have a sin to confess here with Soundgarden. I've never in my life listened to a complete Soundgarden album. I know I need to change that, especially
Well,
given the story I just gave you. But
you know, I kind of understand that, and I spent a lot of time also listening to Soundgarden in my high school years, and I never felt that Soundgarden put out one of those albums that was like epic beginning to end. And I think that's why I also never did the same with Soundgarden. You take a band like Stone Temple Pilots, their first album, Core, epic beginning to end. It's one of those albums that you can just put on repeat and listen to the whole thing. Every song's a banger. They're all really, really amazing. And not to disparage Soundgarden in any way, form, or fashion, I just don't think that they ever completed a work. You know,
did you
they
say
didn't create that
completed a
kind of,
work?
yeah, like a full, like it just never felt complete. I guess is
Okay,
really what I'm
okay.
trying to say. But yeah,
Um,
that's a really good one.
well, before I ask you yours, a little more context behind those answers. So, my father, thank God, was a subscriber to either Columbia Music House or
Oh
Fingerhut.
man.
The days when you could get 10 CDs for a penny.
Yeah,
However, that scam worked. My father was the beneficiary of those processes back then. Glad he did because I grew up in a house full of CDs and cassettes. And the Super Unknown album from Soundgarden was one I remember playing and raising an eyebrow to. It was a new sound. It was a different sound.
for sure.
Before that, what was I listening to? Shit, the Ninja Turtle soundtrack, maybe. I don't know what I was listening to before Soundgarden. And the other was Alice in Chains. It was Facelift, that album. I really bonded with that album. I remember listening to the album front to back and looking at the CD art and reading the thanks from all the musicians and reading the lyrics. And that was my first real album that I just dove straight into. Had no context, had no reason, just hopped into it and listened to it. And then, going through my dad's other CDs, a band that I've never listened to, but I can see the album art to this day. Do you remember a band named Crocus?
I do not.
I will find the album art. It is a striking image. It grabbed my attention. I think I remember listening to it and I was like, ew, yuck, whatever. And I just moved on.
Yeah.
Probably worth me going back to listen to that album. Aside from that, maybe some Judas Priest also. Definitely remember listening to
Oh
some live
yeah,
Judas Priest CDs. So early roots for me, that's what it looks like.
for
And
sure.
yeah, yeah. So how about you? What's your answer?
I began this podcast by saying, Eddie Van Halen was a huge thing for me. I remember seeing MTV for the first time and seeing the Van Halen jump video, and I just wanted a pair of leotards and a goofy striped guitar, just like Eddie Van Halen's.
Yeah.
I mean, when I got this Fender Mustang back here, it used to have electrical tape on it to mimic those stripes. So I was all about that. But the first album that made me just go, whoa, was Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction. And my dad gave me that album on vinyl. And you were talking about album art, which is a lost art these days, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but it had this great album art. The front was really cool, but the back had this depiction. It was, you know, this is going to be kind of sensitive to some listeners, but it was a depiction of this woman that had been assaulted by a robot. and it was just wild. And I'll never forget my mom seeing that and just being like, what? Like, no. But it
Yeah.
was, and that just turned me on to it even more because I knew it was kind of forbidden fruit, you know. So
Sure.
I
Yeah.
I had to have more. And my dad, my real father, um, my biological father, I should say, he was a metalhead through and through. I mean, he introduced me to Pantera, huge Megadeth fan, huge Metallica fan. So I really grew up on all of those kinds of things, and I do really appreciate that. I lived in a household where music was just always like unabashedly pushed down my throat, but not in a bad way. You know, it was really great. And I look back fondly on a lot of those memories. But yeah, it was Appetite for Destruction that really just kind of solidified it. And that's kind of a determining factor for me on music these days, current music. Anytime a new album from somebody comes out, can I listen to the whole thing beginning to end? It's rare.
Well, I mean, it's sure it takes a little bit of conditioning and endurance to listen to a full album front to back. Sure, it takes a little bit of that, but you have to be okay with the fact that you're not going to like every song. Also, we don't tell a friend about a TV show. Oh man, you're really going to love this show. Just check out season 3, episode 2. That's all you need to see.
Yeah,
Like we
yeah.
don't do that with TV shows. We watch full seasons. I wish people just by default kind of gave albums that same respect. If you're
Yeah.
gonna watch a show, you're gonna start it from season 1 and see how it turns out. And that's something that I love doing with albums. I love to get the full range of ideas for one period of time from a group of artists.
Well, I think there's a
And there,
big difference between bands that are trying to create like their master work, right? And that's when the album typically comes out great beginning to end. And then there's also bands that are just trying to create filler to put out a full album. And I think that's very noticeable. Like you mentioned, I think Breaking Benjamin earlier or something like that, you know.
I didn't, but
3 Days Grace, maybe. That's
yeah,
what it
there,
was.
sure, yeah,
They're all the
yeah,
same.
yeah.
But I think a lot of those are filler because, you know, they sound the same. I don't really believe it tells a story. I'm probably going to tick a lot of people off saying that. Whatever. I apologize. But that's just my thought process on that. You know, going back to the old Seattle grunge days, and you mentioned Alice in Chains. I don't think there was an album they put out that I couldn't listen to beginning to end. You know,
Hmm.
so I that's a really fantastic example in my opinion.
We probably need to talk about, definitely we need to talk about this Era album. Before we get to that Era album, earlier this week, I think I shared a band with you that you heard for the first time, Karmanjakah.
Dude,
So real quick, my history with these guys, I'd say maybe 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, they released another song that also grabbed my ear. Um, and what I heard was Thal, to be quite honest, which was the most appealing ingredient. Um,
did you say Thal?
I did say Thal,
Oh,
yes.
that's a
I'll get,
controversial term.
but you know what? If you know it, you know it.
Yeah,
And I know that you know what I'm talking
I
about.
do. I do.
But what they did not have was over complexity, and they did not have a bunch of technicality. That was almost trying to get in front of what they presented. So I see them as contortionist adjacent
Ooh,
because they are super calm. The Carmen Jaka, they are super calm. They really have a tasty sound. They have got tone for days. They're very bass forward in the tone they present. They are, from what I can tell, they're a 4-piece: singer, drum, bass, guitar. That is it.
yeah,
And thanks to everything that modern musicians can do these days behind a DAW, yeah, they just got a great sound. So they just released this new song, Eyes Seeing Eyes. And man, tasty song, delicious. I really like it. I see that they have like one other album that came out in 2023. So
yeah. I'm
pretty
gonna I'm
early.
gonna dive into that other album as well, which I have not done yet. I have
Yeah.
listened to Eyes Seeing Eyes. I was taken aback by that song. It's it's hauntingly simple, if you know what I mean. Like it's got
Yeah.
this simplicity to it that still somehow makes it come off as complex. It's very easy to digest. Would kind of be how I would put it. Yeah, I
Yes.
it starts off really soft. It gets into its heavy spots, but even the heavy spots aren't heavy. And you mentioned tone. I think tone these days is so much easier to achieve from a recording standpoint than it was, when when we were trying to do stuff back in the infancy of Pro Tools.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, just the tone itself really sets the tone for the song, and yeah, well done. Like definitely multiple re-listens for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Curious to see what this album from them is going to sound like. I did listen to their previous EP. Haven't listened to it enough. Listened to it once all the way through, 4 songs. Worth a listen. Before we get to Era, any other
Well, I was going to
albums
touch
or
a little bit base
bands?
more on the fact that you sent me that one song. They've only released that one song off the new potential album. What is your take? Because I have some mixed feelings about this. What is your take about the modern practice of bands slowly releasing the album over time rather than just dropping it all at once?
It's I don't see it as evil. I don't. I see it as necessary. I see it as the only way to measure growth and momentum. When these guys are trying to make names for themselves and trying to attract more listeners, um, in the here we go with the TV series analogies, but when a whole new series that nobody was expecting just drops the whole entire season, and people will check it out, maybe they won't check it out, but all of the work is out there and it's submitted. There's no taking it back.
Yeah.
Um, Compare that to a TV series where you get one episode a week. You gotta you we have to remind ourselves of what it was like to experience TV shows in the cable TV days. In modern era, bands doing that, I see it as necessary if you want to really measure growth. Um, so I have no problem with it. What, do you have an issue with it?
No, I mean, I have mixed feelings. I think in the modern age of social media, you have to do it. I don't
Yeah.
think, just like you said, there's really no way around it. The good thing is you can release a song and gauge the feedback, and you're still in the mixing process on the rest of the stuff. You can pull it back and make some adjustments based on what the feedback is from the clientele, the listener. The downside to it for me is I do miss like the complete and total surprise of just like a full album drop, and that takes me back to 1996, whenever you'd go to the what was the CD store in the mall, and you'd go and grab the new Marilyn Manson album and listen to it on the headphones that they had at the CD store and say, "Yep, I'm taking that home." And just you got to kind of commit, you know.
Yeah.
Um, it's like people that go to a brewery, all right, and they want to try a little sample of everything before they make up their mind what they want. I mean, come on. And that's part of my business as well. We do that in the wine industry. But at the same time, it's just like, you like an IPA. They have a new IPA, and I'm sorry you haven't tasted it before, but just dive right in. Check it out.
Agree, agreed there. But
Commit.
your comment does make me think about something. Like there's a difference between a band like Karmanjakah that, from what I can see, only has maybe 4 or 5 years worth of history.
And nobody knows who
Um,
they are.
Odds are, like, I don't know how many subscribers they're working with, but I'll find it and post the info. Like they need to do that. But a
Yeah,
band
I agree.
like, for example, like Polyphia, I mean, they've already established their reputation. Do they really need to continue to measure engagement and growth? And do they need to release single by single by single by single until the full album is released? Probably not.
But I think Polyphia does that as content, you know? Not only are they musicians, they're YouTube creators, if you really think about it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And
And
that there's a very distinct line between YouTube creation and um, just being a full-fledged musician, and they're doing that to stay relevant. Because honestly, there are a lot of other bands out there that can do what Polyphia does. I mean, we talked about Sean the other day, In and Out.
I
Just
disagree. Hold on. I disagree that there's a lot of other bands that can do what Polyphia is doing. If you're talking about their their music,
yeah,
the music they present, is that what you're talking about, or you mean just instrumental
stylistically, but yeah, kind
stuff?
of.
Okay, okay, yeah. I mean, maybe I'm wrong here. I don't believe, and I don't say this because I love Polyphia, but I don't think Polyphia has an equal. I don't think that they, in the modern days, I do not think they have a equal that's out there competing with their product.
Yeah,
Um, they, for better or worse, do have a unique sound that people know them for. And yeah, you mentioned Chon. We spoke about Chon the other day. R.I.P. Chon. Where the fuck is Chon? What
R.I.P.
have?
man.
Let me look them up. Where is Chon? What have they
Yeah, I
done? Let's
think.
see. Wow.
Yeah,
Yep.
while you're looking that up,
2019.
I'll
That is the most recent release from them. 2019.
2018,
R.I.P.
2019,
2019.
2019. So
Had a
what
full album, 12 songs.
was that, 7 years ago, 8 years ago? Yeah, wow, shit.
Yeah.
Whew.
Yeah.
Poor Chon.
Um, yeah, the world forgot about Chon. And back when Mark and I were in our one of our first bands, I think toward the end of our band's life cycle, Chon started to appear. And there was no one else like Chon that we knew of, at least. There was no one else that was making clean guitar heavy work. There was nobody else doing that. They were the ones. And we knew that they would set up a nice they would blaze a trail. And I believe they did. Unfortunately, the
Yeah.
world forgot about them. I mean, I don't hear much praise going to Chon.
Well, that brings up a really good point. When we were playing music back in the early 2000s, and we had another band later on, after Daniel's stint in Birmingham. Um, but in the early 2000s, I mean, you remember when we went and played at the Hard Rock Cafe in front of those record executives and stuff, and they all looked at us and said, instrumental metal music will never amount to anything. You can't sell that.
Yeah,
And
I
then
remember that.
here we are. You got Animals as leaders. You got Chon. You got David Maxim Mikic. You got Intervals. I mean, it's just like the list goes on and on and on. Owen.
I built the sky. Don't you dare leave out I built the
Oh
sky.
yeah, absolutely, man. Go
Yeah.
Australia.
Yeah,
I love
it's
Australian metal, dude. Don't get it twisted. I love it.
and I do think that heavy instrumental metal, I do believe it was born out of the necessity to answer a call from within, but you don't have a singer.
Yeah,
Let's stop letting that hold us back and let's get the ideas out anyway. I feel that's where a lot of these bands were really born from. That same method of thinking.
for sure, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's jump into this Era album, and I wanted to talk about this just because it's so hot and fresh right now. It's even actually starting to cool off a little bit.
Yeah.
But holy crap, dude! Like, this just kind of came out of nowhere, and I've had some experience with Era in the past. Based out of Birmingham, started in 2009. Which you were still living in Birmingham in 2009. So it's just wild that you never crossed paths with these guys or saw them at a live show or something. But
Yeah. Yeah.
now you have seen them live, right?
I have seen them live. I saw they were opening for the Contortionist. Um, I believe it was at Trees in Dallas.
Yeah,
So yes, I unfortunately didn't really latch on to them at the time. They struck me as very whatever. They struck me
yeah,
as nothing special. They were talented. I could hear that. They had good tone. I could hear that. I could appreciate that, but there was no good songwriting in my opinion. It didn't do
for
anything for
sure.
me.
What do you think about their stage presence?
It was fine. Sure. Whatever. It was
There's a reason.
typical metal shit.
I have motive when I ask that question. There is a lot of talk out there, and they're touring right now. So there's a lot of talk out there about their stage presence and how it's not as animated as other metal bands. But when you listen to, to what these guys are doing, um, like I can barely sing Wonderwall and play it at the same time, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
You got, what's his name? Jesse Cash, the guitar player and clean vocals, doing Van Halen style tapping and singing at the same time. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, you can't move on stage when you're doing that. So that's where I was going with that for sure.
I will say this though, when it comes to stage presence, Jesse, absolutely
Oh my
killer
God.
player. The ability for him to do what he does and sing, I can't fault him. I just the man does great work.
I
Just
mean,
the
that's like
songs
Dave
themselves didn't
Matthews
grab
level
me.
talent right there.
Yeah, yeah. In a weird multiverse kind of way, if Dave
Yeah.
Matthews got into this
I've
kind of
never
music,
understood
sure.
how he does it. I never have understood how he does it.
Oh no.
Oh man.
So yeah, looking real quick before we talk about this album, kind of looking at Erra's history. Yeah, 2011 is the first album I'm seeing. It looks like maybe a release every other year for quite a while. I saw them in 2016, 2017. So I probably saw them around the time Drift was coming out.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and then if you
now
look
that
at
this
all
album
of
has come
the,
out, I absolutely want to listen to their history
for
and
sure.
kind of follow their tracks. Yeah.
And there's some great albums out there, but not every album is a beginning to end story slash banger. Which is okay. There's always been some good in there, and I've followed most of it. Um, the other thing that you got to put into perspective is they've had so many lineup changes over the years. The only two original members are the drummer and Jesse. So, just in that aspect, they've evolved as a band to the point where they're at now. They're on their second or third um, unclean vocalist, I guess you could call it.
And please
Um,
just say it is screaming.
Screamer.
There's no
Yeah,
such
he's just a screamer.
please.
Um, yeah, I'm trying to be PC here.
There is no cleans or non cleans. It is singing. It is screaming. That is
Yeah,
it. I
without a doubt, that is what it
it's fine.
Yeah.
I'll never win this war. It's people are gonna say that till the end of time.
So this album, Silence Outlives the Earth. This was one that was, slowly leaked out. I think they leaked out 4 songs before they released the whole album.
Hmm.
Um, and the one that caught my attention was "The Many Names of God," which is actually a 3-part song. And it only stood out to me because it was the heaviest thing I had ever heard Era put out. So then I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to listen to this whole album. Obviously, there's a transformation going on here. And what I found was it wasn't that. I mean, it's a heavy album. Don't get it twisted. Um, it's still very Era all throughout. I mean, they put their thumbprint on everything.
Hmm.
And there's no mistaking when you listen to this album that it's Era. But you've heard me say this about bands in the past, especially with the release of the new Thrice album. I was like, that is the most mature, most grown up offering that they've offered us yet. Same thing goes for Silence Outlives the Earth. It seemed like it was just really well planned out, thought out, written, and just produced extremely well. So it caught my attention, and I haven't been able to put it down.
I have a point of disagreement. And
Sure.
this is I think this also kind of comes from my apprehension to give Era a shot because in the previous work I've heard, yes, I've heard some catchy riffs, I've heard good tone, and I've heard singing and screaming. Um, it never grabbed my ear before. This album did for whatever reason. I guess we'll get to it, but I disagree that as soon as a listener hears this, they know it's Era. What are their defining characteristics, in your opinion?
Well, one song, for example, "Further Eden" is textbook Era. And when I say that, really what I'm referring to is the fact that they had this or used to, and it's still present in a lot of their songs, that they have this really playful, genty, major scale metal style, which I love. But it's very welcoming. It's very fun. It's bouncy. Um, these are the best adjectives that I can come up to describe this at the moment.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
but it's
No,
just,
I'm not here to tell you you're wrong in any of that. I just wanted to know kind of what you saw as their defining characteristics, because in my mind, they are doing kind of what everybody else are doing, just they're doing it well.
yeah,
Which I won't talk about these guys for long, but oralize, avrilize, however you want to say it.
yeah,
But I had no reason to like oralize or avrilize. I had no reason to like
same.
them because they were just kind of doing what everybody else was doing in the modern metal world, but they did it well, and
Yeah.
my ear was forced to sonar in and figure out what's happening here, and that's what this album did. Um, by the way, can we give it up for there's not a song on this album that exceeds about 4.5 minutes. Like it
Yeah,
doesn't feel that way when you're listening to the album. When you listen to
I
this album,
agree.
it feels like a continuous body that is constantly evolving and showing itself around every new corner that you're not expecting. Like they make such good use of the time provided for each song. So not a given these days. A lot of metal bands want to exceed 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes. I'm all for those songs, but pretty rare that an album this good has so many songs under 4.5 minutes.
We live in a consumer society, and I think you have to keep people's attention just long enough, but also take them to the next thing pretty quick. You gave me a good example the other night when you were talking about your wife flipping through the cat videos.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
she
Oh,
just wanted to
God,
see
just
what the next cat behavior was, and like
yeah,
I'm,
yeah.
I'm right there with you. It's like sometimes you just want to skip and see what the next thing is. There's no reason to skip anything in this because you never get a chance. You're never offered an opportunity.
And kind of along that same thinking. Yeah, don't I never wanted to. There was never a moment in this whole entire album when I said, "Man, I guess this song just isn't really for me. I guess I should skip to the next song." That never happened. I was completely fine with this album just ripping, and it always gave me something to have fun with. So yeah, I can't say this is not a strong contender for album of the year. Um,
Dude, it's up there. I made the very bold statement. This is the first or the best metal album I've heard in 16 years. A lot of people are going to disagree with that, but my previous favorite was Periphery 2. Um, this gave me that goosebumps sensation that I got from that album 16 years ago, and that's what
no,
got me all
no.
worked up about it.
I mean, different circumstances. Like, at least in my opinion, the circumstances with Periphery, Misha spends his time in the forums. He works with folks. He perfects his own drumming. He works on recording. He works on tones. Does it by himself for years and years and years, and has over 100 songs just kind of sitting on a drive somewhere that just ripped. All of the old Bulb songs were so good and unlike anything else at that time. And then Periphery 1 releases, and it's like, all right, I guess you're finding your footing. This is all right. But Periphery 2 comes out, and it's like, oh, that's what you intended to do.
Yeah,
So different circumstances with Era. From my perspective, Era never did much for me, and hey, they've tweaked something, or they've found some new formula that is delivering for maybe folks like myself that didn't really have much of a reason to listen to them before.
yeah.
Yeah.
So something I noticed about this entire body of work, um, I've always said that when a band releases a new album, or I say always say, something I always do is I listen and try to figure out who they've been touring with, and you can really. I hate to say this, and I don't mean it in any type of a disparaging way, but there are some influences in here, whether it just be influences or people that they've toured with in the past that they've taken, some ideas from. There are some songs where I hear some Mike Stringer in this for sure, especially on the um, major scale Genty stuff. There's some, the last song, Twilight and the Reflection of Dreams, very Tesseracty, in my opinion. And they've toured with Tesseract. So it just makes me wonder if there's not some kind of influence coming in from the other artists that they're surrounding themselves with, which, I mean, only makes sense. I mean, we were always influenced by other artists. Why
Yeah.
wouldn't they be? Um, I watched a podcast recently, specifically talking about Black Cloud being very inspired by Seosin, their love of Seosin and Circus Survive, which
hmm
you can hear very much so in there. But yeah, I just kind of wondered what your thoughts were on that.
So while you were mentioning that, I was like, I wonder who they've toured with over the last 4 years or so. And I mean, I'm looking at a lot of big names here, of course. I mean, these guys have definitely been on the map and have been on a lot of people's radar for a long time. Just, here I am just now kind of getting into them. Um, Seosin, Another Confession, is still a band and I'm going to add it to my list of to listen to, but never listened to a full Seosin album. Definitely know I need to.
Yeah, I'm not a huge Seosin fan. When Anthony Green came back to the band and recorded an album with them, that's when I got interested, and then I started going back through the backlog. And they've had vocalist changes over the years. I'm not particularly a fan of their current vocalist. A lot of people are diehard fans of him. Not my thing. Kind of like bands like Good Tiger.
Yeah.
It's not for everybody, but there's a lot of great stuff in there. You turned me on to Circus Survive back in the day. For me,
Oh,
I've been a huge.
I did.
You did, yes, sir. You did.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow. Okay. I didn't realize
you
I
were living
did.
in Birmingham.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when I heard Circle Survive for the first time. I was working at Best Buy. A good friend of mine at work, we were bonding over music. They said, "Man, you got to listen to this." They played Uterna, first song on Circle Survive's album. Can't remember the album title.
Did you turn
Sold
up?
immediately. But that
Yeah.
was the album title. Okay.
So you
Sold
sold me
immediately. I was
on
like, "No
letting
way."
go. That was about when you told me about it. And you literally called me one day and
Funny.
said, "You got to go buy this album right now." And I went to Best Buy and bought this album and
On
went
Letting
home.
Go, that was your first entry to Circa?
Yeah, that was my first
That's
circuit entry.
wow. I did not realize that. I figured you would have listened to Juturna when I discovered him, but yeah,
I hate
that's funny.
Uterna. It's my least favorite Circus Survive album.
um, maybe
Blue
we could
Sky
talk
Boys
about
is actually my
yeah.
favoritely
Yeah, maybe we definitely need to talk about Circa another episode. That's a
Oh
huge
yeah,
band for you. To address the question you asked, I'm not looking at metrics on my computer right now. I'm not looking at metrics for Era and how well they've done over the years, but I'm sure a band like Era, especially going through a lot of members, churning through a lot of members over the years, you've got to try a different approach. You've got to mix it up a little bit. North Lane, Silent Planet, Novelists, Make Them Suffer, Wage War, August Burns Red. Like I'm looking at such a huge list of
yeah,
folks they've toured with. International tours. Like there's no telling the wealth of knowledge they've picked up, the moments of inspiration they've picked up from touring with these huge bands.
for sure.
So yeah, it's obviously, back in 2022, the touring with Beartooth and Bad Omens, more Silent Planet back then, Alpha Wolf. Obviously, they've earned their keep. They've earned their seat at the table, and this album will be, I think, their most remembered. I say that not having any knowledge of the previous work. I know that Drift is one that is looked back on fondly. I know Drift is an album that a lot of Era fans always cite as their flagship work. So
Yeah.
worth a shot for me to give Drift a try and see what it was about back then.
So you sent me a list whenever I first sent this album to you. And when I first sent it to you, I think you listened to a couple songs, and I called you and I was like, "Have you listened to this album?" You're like, "I've got to confess, I haven't listened to the whole thing." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Put your damn earbuds in and listen to the whole fucking album and just roll with it." And I don't know, an hour or two later, you sent me back a screenshot, and you had starred the ones that just like blew your mind. Do you
Yeah.
kind of remember your thought process on what made you feel that way about those songs?
It was probably three or four passive listens. So it was moments that grabbed my attention. It was unexpected turns. Uh, it was harmonics I didn't see coming. It was just tone that I've been just dying to hear somebody do, and finally someone did it. Like there were so many moments like that that just peeled my attention right back to them. It turned that passive listen into active listening. Um, and that's what I want. I would love to just be able to throw an album on passively, and the album knows I'm not paying attention. The album says, "No, motherfucker, look over here,
Right.
listen to this." So yeah, that's where that came from for sure. And yeah,
Uh,
I was so apprehensive on giving that album a shot because I'm unfortunately super judgmental with modern metal bands, and I do need to kind of loosen my judgments a little. Yes, I have been inundated with metal, and I've heard it done so many different ways, and I've seen so many different versions of the same band popping up and doing an imitation of some other band I've heard before. It's just you get tired of it, you get lost in it, and I have to loosen my regulations sometimes and just give an album a shot.
for sure.
Yeah.
I one of the things that I really took away from this is that number one, the track list they set up really well. It's got a lot of dynamics, a lot of ups and downs, peaks and valleys. But every time I listen to this album, I can't escape this one thought, and I do this with every modern metal artist. Is like if you gave these guys some tube amps, took away the backing track, all they had was a click track. You gave these guys some tube amps and a whole floor rig of pedals that does everything that they need to make the sounds that they need. Could these guys actually perform this live without Neural DSP or Axe Effects um, in a backing track?
Is that your question? I mean, I don't
That
think
is my question.
you're
Could
not
these
asking
guys
me that question.
perform
Just
it the way we used to perform in the early 2000s?
I know I don't believe so. I don't believe if that's your task, I don't believe this is the band that would deliver on that.
Nope,
Um,
I agree.
and really, again, kind of a product of its age these days. It is almost necessary to not just on your album to present the sonic landscape that you want to be seen. You don't want that to be lost by the time somebody comes to a live show. Somebody wants to hear what they experienced on that album. And backing tracks, laptops will always be the fifth or sixth member of your band.
Yep,
They will always. Um, yeah, the laptop is undefeated.
it is undefeated. That was not a luxury we ever
Uh,
had.
no, no. I'd love to see it. And the one band that comes to mind that's doing it is probably Thrice.
Thrice,
They,
without a doubt.
their laptop might be a metronome, maybe, but
Yeah.
they probably have no laptop presenting their sonic landscape. Their sonic landscape is exclusively from their bodies and their muscles.
I mean, hell, Tepe built all of his own guitars for that album. I mean, for
Yeah,
Christ's sake.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Oh man, it's just
Tepe's the
like that
man.
that level of craftsmanship. And not to say that any of these modern metal bands aren't, crafting something amazing, but they're using all the tools that are available to them, and you can't fault them for that, obviously. But I do have this like thirst to like hear the raw stuff, and I want to hear like one of these modern metal bands like go back to the primal roots, and do it that way.
Can you think of? I may have one. Can you think of a modern metal band, modern heavy band that is doing that? Can you think of one? I think I have one.
Off the top of my head, I can, but I'm not 100% sure I'm right.
I'm the same
Because
way. So how about this? On three, let's say
okay,
our answers. Okay, I think we're gonna say the same artist
I
here. I
don't
think we're
know.
gonna say the same band. I don't know if I'm right, and is this band are they delivering that? All right, here we go. One, two, three.
Kill switch engage.
Not. Oh God, no.
Because they're old.
I mean, probably. Yeah, you're probably right there. I was going to say. I hesitated. I wanted to see who you were going to say first.
Between the
Uh,
Buried and Me would be another one.
no. Probably. Yeah, yeah. Given that Tommy does a lot of synth um, on his piano, probably. I was going to say the Calistar Boys.
Yeah, you know,
I
yeah. But you gotta, yeah. I'm
again,
50-50 on that.
I could be wrong. I can think of a few sounds that real instruments are not producing.
I think they're produced to be raw for a reason. I do think they're still using the tools. I think they're produced to be raw specifically to make you feel like they're raw. I love those guys, by the way. Oh,
Yeah, yeah, I do too. Yeah,
that's a whole
and
nother podcast in itself.
that is a whole nother podcast. The only thing I'll say about it is that was kind of the inverse with you with Erra and then sending it to me and trying to twist my arm. I had to twist your arm on the Callous Cowboys album. I knew you'd dig it because I know you. And I knew that I was going to have to really dig my elbow in your ass to get you to listen to it. I knew I was going to have to because I knew that there was content there for you. I knew that there was an album that you'd love, but I knew that you would have to listen through the bullshit you don't want to hear. Um,
Yeah.
that was that album's biggest
But now I
challenge.
love that bullshit. That whole album is another one that I just couldn't put down.
Yeah,
Yeah, we'll talk about that on another podcast. Uh,
totally down.
let's step away from Era as we get kind of ready to wrap stuff up here. As well as we've just gone off the rails a little bit. I wanted to touch base quickly on YouTube content creators, specifically guitar content creators that have gone off and done other things as well. But we're gonna
Okay,
play a little game of F Mary Kill. Okay,
okay,
you know how to
okay.
play that, right?
I know how to play that.
Okay. So we're gonna play some F Mary Kill, and I'm gonna give you Jared Dines, Nick Nocturnal, and Rob Scallon.
Okay. Uh, Kill an immediate Nick Nocturnal. Um,
Okay,
n-
that's not where I thought you would go with that, but I
Kill
love
is
it.
Kill is an immediate Nick Nocturnal. I'll explain myself another day.
Okay,
Um, which I have no ill intention towards Nick. I love Nick, but he's just not my favorite of the guys you presented. He's not my favorite. Um,
I feel like that dude never sleeps and he's a vampire.
I mean, he looks it sure, but
Yeah.
not my beef with Nick. Anyway, Marion F. Uh, F. Rob Scallion.
Okay.
Rob's a great player. Rob's a out of the box player. He's an out of the box musician. Rob's an important element in guitar culture. He really is. And he almost alongside Jared Dines has a seasoned career on YouTube. Yeah, I mean, really
Absolutely.
some of the earliest days of guitar YouTube I associate with Rob, as I do with Jared Dines, which I'll bring to the Mary. Jared Dines really turned his presentation around. Jared Dines with Musician Mansion, best thing he's ever done.
Yeah, as much as I hate to admit that, I really did enjoy both seasons of that. A lot of fun.
I enjoyed season one. It was fun, but it wasn't musical. And yes, season two, so good. So
It
good.
was good. I mean,
Finally, a music based television competition show. Music is inherently not competitive.
oh, the Greystone coming out of that was just.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
I can't
you
get
know,
enough of that.
Jared Dines, he's had his times of being cringe and just being a fucking goober. That's fine. Jared Dines also is nothing to sneeze at when it comes to a guitar player. He's good. He's good,
He's
but
good. He is good.
he is kind of cursed in one lane, unfortunately. And that's not where Jared Dines' strengths are for me. He has really opened up my eyes to Dickie Dines. Dickie, by the way, the Dickie Dines podcast. They have a great show, and Dickie's a great singer. Musician Mansion really helped me kind of realize that. So yeah, that would be my answers. I've spoken too long on this. I'm sorry.
Right on. No, I love it. That's the kind of banter I was looking for, man. I told you I
Yeah.
had something special for you. So
Okay.
I feel like
Well,
we need
since
to carry that through all the future shows.
okay, all right.
So
Well,
you're in charge of the next one.
okay.
Are you sipping on anything tonight?
But man, just some water and some sweet tea from Outback. Went to Outback Steakhouse, and I haven't been to
Ooh.
Outback, and I don't even remember how long. But um, wanted to circle back around quickly to wrap it up with a rating for Era, this album in
Ooh.
particular.
Oh.
We'll
Oh.
do a simple we'll do a simple 5-star rating.
5-star rating. Whew. Can I use decimals?
Sure, who cares?
Okay.
None of this matters.
I don't believe that I've ever heard an absolutely perfect album, but I also don't want to be the douchebag that never gives 5 stars. I don't want to be you know, the guy that does the pizza reviews. What's his name? Portnoy. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I don't want to be that guy. I also don't want to give this album a full 5-star review. Does it deserve it? Probably. But there's always some kind of room for improvement. But I would give this a solid, and this is a high rating, I believe, personally, a solid 4.25.
Okay, lower than I thought you'd give it, but
Yep.
you justified your answer.
I gotta give myself a ceiling in case there's something better.
Before I tell you my before I tell you my rating, what room do they have to improve in your eyes? Where else could they take their product?
I think a little bit more feel in the music. I think they achieved a lot of that this time around. That was my big qualm with Era in the past is their music didn't have feel, it didn't have
Hmm.
emotion. This album does. I do think there is still some room to improve on that. I think the drums are damn near perfect. My other big issue is I feel like the bass player is a guitar player that is playing bass.
Yeah, yeah, I'd agree with that. But here's what I was gonna say.
Okay.
I feel like what would deliver your wishes there for a little bit more feel in their album is less drums. Yes, the drums sound
Well,
terrific, and
they're
yes, they
very
were
tasteful.
executed. Yeah,
Yeah.
they were executed wonderfully. They're tasty. But what would deliver more feel? Probably more moments of just drumless music.
Yeah.
More of that would deliver, I think, that feel that you're talking about. So yeah, I
So
could agree with that.
dynamics in general, a
Sure,
little bit more on
sure.
the dynamic side.
Because yeah, you are kind of assaulted with drums in every song. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
and I love that your score is not really colored by recency bias. I felt you and I have had enough time to sit with this album and give
Yeah.
it its repeated listens and its revisits. So what would I rate it? I'd give it a heavy 4.5, a heavy four and a
Yeah.
half, because
That's higher than
I
I thought you would give it.
yeah, yeah. It's another metal album at the end of the day, and I don't think it's going to flip a non-metal listener into listening to this album and saying, you know what, I think I like metal now. I don't think this is that album for the world, but it's been a long time since I've heard a metal album done this well.
Yeah.
I've I've given a lot of albums a shot. I've given a lot of songs a shot, a lot of bands a shot. This is the first album I've heard in a long time
Well, and you got to
that
think metal's making its way slowly back into the mainstream. You got bands like Spirit Box
yeah, yeah.
and Sleep Token that are really pushing metal back into the public eye. You know, for Courtney LaPlante and Spirit Box to be up on stage at the Grammys, what was the last metal band that was on the Grammys? Killswitch, like that I remember. I think that's a pretty
Yeah,
big
I can't
deal, and
remember.
it's kind
Yeah.
of starting to come back around, in my opinion. So hopefully, this momentum for metal bands can keep moving forward, and as long as they are implementing those tools to help foster, people that aren't normal metal listeners. Bill Murray, another great example,
Hmm.
which we use the term metal there very lightly. Um, but yeah, it's kind of that bridge, that gap, to kind of get people back listening to metal again.
Yeah, ultimately, as metal fans, as heavy music fans, that's all we want at the end of the day. We want more people in the crowd, more supporters for the bands that we support and love. We just want more of that. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, metal and heavy music these days just isn't seen as desirable for whatever reason. So, yeah, another
Well,
topic for
streaming
another
did a lot.
time.
For
Streaming
sure.
did a lot, yes.
Streaming did a lot.
Streaming Yeah, streaming brought a lot of information and visibility to all of us to really know what the landscape looks like. Pretty ugly out there. There's some ugly examples of streaming numbers being overinflated. I'm looking forward to our next get together. I think this was a lot of fun.
Sure.
I definitely want to talk about kind of the future of AI in music. Got a lot to talk about there, of course. Looking forward to revisiting more classics you and I have never heard, filling out our need to listens. So yeah, we've got a lot of fun
Yeah.
stuff planned for the show.
For those of you that are watching this, put in the comments what kind of content you want to hear from us, because this is day one. We're gonna figure this out as we go, and we're gonna give you a better product every single time. So, what do you want to hear? What do you want to know about? Anytime we make a musical, suggestion, we highly encourage you to go and listen to that music. Use a great set of headphones or earbuds, and just to keep rocking, man.
Yes, don't listen to music just on your iPhone speaker, please. Or your crappy little Bluetooth
Please don't.
speaker. Like, you just give it the respect it deserves. Yes, thank you all for stopping by to check this out and give us a listen. Please like and subscribe. Please leave a comment. Just like Mark said, please leave a comment on things you'd like to hear us talk about, or if you have questions for the general everyday metalhead that might be flying under the radar. I don't know if you'd really pick either of us up as metalheads. I know I get a raised eyebrow every time somebody discovers that about myself. So,
All right.
but
Well,
yes,
thank you guys.
Mark, take care, brother. Love.
Love you, brother.
Bye.